The 8,418th meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is non-proliferation. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representatives of Germany and the Islamic Republic of Iran to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the following briefers to participate in this meeting. Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo, Under-Secretary General for Political Affairs, and Mr. Serge Christian, Chargé d'Affaires ad interim of the delegation of the European Union to the United Nations. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of Item 2 of the agenda. I wish to draw the attention of Council members to the following documents. S/2018/1070, a letter dated 30th November 2018 to the President of the Security Council from the Security Council Facilitator for the implementation of Resolution 2231. S/2018-1089, the sixth report of the Secretary General on the implementation of Security Council Resolution 2231, and S/2018/1106, a letter dated 11th December 2018, addressed to the President of the Security Council from the Security Council Facilitator for the implementation of Resolution 2231. At this meeting, the Security Council will hear briefings by Mr. DiCarlo, Mr. Christian, and Ambassador Karel van Oosterom, permanent representative of the Netherlands, in his capacity as Security Council Facilitator for the implementation of Resolution 2231. I now give the floor to Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo.
Thank you, Mr. President, Excellencies. Security Council Resolution 2231 endorsed the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which came into effect on 16 January 2016. The Secretary General welcomed the plan as a demonstration of successful multilateralism and a major achievement of nuclear nonproliferation, dialogue, and diplomacy. Last month, as it has done since Implementation Day, the International Atomic Energy Agency reported to this Council that Iran continues to implement its nuclear-related commitments. Mr. President, the Secretary General welcomes the affirmation by JCPOA participants of their commitments to its full and effective implementation. It is essential that the plan continues to work for all participants, including by delivering economic, tangible benefits to the Iranian people. He regrets the reimposition by the United States of its sanctions lifted pursuant to the plan after its withdrawal from the JCPOA. The Secretary General believes that issues not directly related to the plan should be addressed without prejudice to preserving the agreement and its accomplishments. At the same time, he calls on Iran to carefully consider and address the concerns expressed by member states about its activities in relation to the restrictive measures contained in Annex B to the resolution. The Secretary General notes that the plan remains in effect and that the Security Council has called upon all member states, regional and international organizations to support implementation of the plan and to refrain from actions that undermine it. Mr. President, I thank you for the opportunity to brief the Security Council on the sixth report of the Secretary General on the implementation of Resolution 2231. As guided by the Security Council and consistent with our previous reports, the one before you today is focused on Annex B to the resolution. First, on the implementation of the nuclear-related provisions, the Secretariat has received additional information on 2 dual-use items destined for Iran, which were seized by the United Arab Emirates. The manufacturing states of these items informed the Secretariat that, in their assessment, they did not require prior approval by the Security Council through the procurement channel process. In addition, the Secretariat continues to examine information related to the possible transfer of other items undertaken contrary to the resolution, which were brought to its attention by the United Arab Emirates and the United States. It is our assessment that the procurement channel remains a vital transparency and confidence-building mechanism. It ensures that the transfers of certain goods, technology, and/or related services to the Islamic Republic of Iran are consistent with Resolution 2231 and the plan. Since January 2016, 42 proposals have been submitted to the procurement channel, of which 28 have been approved. The Secretary General encourages all states and the private sector to fully utilize and support this channel. Second, on the ballistic missile-related provisions, the report reflects information provided to the Secretary General and to the Security Council by France, Germany, Iran, Israel, the Russian Federation, and the United Kingdom on additional ballistic missile flight tests reportedly conducted by Iran since January 2018, as well as on the launch of several ballistic missiles at targets in Syria on 1 October 2018. The Security Council met on 4 December 2018 to consider the reported test firing of a further medium-range ballistic missile by Iran on 1 December 2018. Since our last report, the Secretariat examined the debris of 3 more ballistic missiles launched at Riyadh by the Houthis in March and April 2018. Those debris were consistent with that of the 5 missiles examined previously, which the Secretariat assessed share key design features with the Iranian Qiyam-1 ballistic missile and had component parts manufactured in Iran. However, the Secretariat has not been able to determine whether such missiles or parts thereof or related technology were transferred from Iran after 16 January 2016, the date when Annex B provisions came into effect. Third, in terms of arms-related provisions, during the reporting period, the Secretariat examined 2 container launch units for anti-tank guided missiles recovered in Yemen. The Secretariat found that they had characteristics of Iranian manufacture and that their markings show production dates in 2016 and 2017. The Secretariat also examined a partly disassembled surface-to-air missile seized by the Saudi-led coalition and observed that its features appeared to be consistent with those of an Iranian Sayyad 2C missile. The Secretariat is still analyzing available information on additional unmanned aerial vehicles recovered in Yemen, including some which appear to have the same design features as the Iranian-made Ababil II. The report also reflects that the Secretariat examined a shipment of about 2,500 assault rifles seized by the United States in the Gulf of Aden in August 2018. The Secretariat observed that these weapons did not have the characteristics of Iranian production. The Secretariat will further analyze this seizure should new information become available and report back accordingly. In addition, the report includes information received from Israel and Iran regarding the alleged transfer of an Iranian-produced Khordad air defense system to the T4 airbase in Syria in April 2018. It also highlights the continued participation of Iranian entities in another foreign arms exhibition held in Baku, Azerbaijan in September 2018. In relation to the travel ban provisions, the report provides additional information on a previous travel by Major General Qasem Soleimani to Iraq in May 2018. Mr. President, in closing, I would like to thank His Excellency Ambassador Karl van Oostrom of the Netherlands for his tenure as facilitator for the implementation of Resolution 2231. I would also like to take this opportunity to congratulate His Excellency Mark Paxton de Boeswerver of Belgium, who will assume the functions of facilitator on 1 January 2019, and to assure him of the Secretariat's full support. I'd also like to thank the coordinator of the Procurement Working Group of the Joint Commission for our continued cooperation. Thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie.
I thank Ms. DiCarlo for her briefing.
I now give the floor to members of the Council that wish to make statements. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Michael R. Pompeo, Secretary of State of the United States of America. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And good morning. Thank you for the kind words. I appreciate them. Just 2 days ago, the head of the IRGC's Airspace Division, Amir Hadizadeh, boasted that Iran is capable of building missiles with a range beyond 2,000 kilometers. He said, quote, "We have the ability to build missiles with broader ranges. We don't have limitations from a technical perspective." End of quote. He also said there are many enemy bases within 800 kilometers of Iran. In other words, within striking distance of Iranian missiles. He bragged that Iran does 40 to 50 tests per year. As I'll talk about further, it is clear that the Iranian regime's ballistic missile activity has grown since the nuclear deal. Iran has exploited the goodwill of nations and defied multiple Security Council resolutions in its quest for a robust ballistic missile force. The United States will never stand for this. No nation that seeks peace and prosperity in the Middle East should either. Since 2006, this Council has been telling Iran to stop testing and proliferating ballistic missiles in one form or another. From 2010 to 2015, Iran was subject to UN Security Council Resolution 1929, the strictest resolution addressing the Iranian ballistic missiles to date. In that resolution, the Security Council decided that Iran shall not undertake any activity related to ballistic missiles capable of delivering nuclear weapons, including launches using ballistic missile technology, and that states shall take necessary measures to prevent the transfer of technology or technical assistance to Iran related to such activities. This provision of UNSCR 1929 imposed a legal prohibition on Iran's ballistic missile activity. There was force of law behind those words. Nevertheless, Iran conducted multiple ballistic missile launches between 2010 and 2015 in flagrant violation of that resolution. So what did we do in response? Did we increase accountability in Iran for serial violations of international law? Quite the opposite. In fact, the level of accountability in Iran has diminished instead of decreased, while the risk has increased. In connection with the Iranian regime's engagement in nuclear talks and at the Obama administration's urging, the Security Council replaced Resolution 1929 with Resolution 2231. Resolution 2231 calls upon Iran not to undertake any activity related to ballistic missiles designed to be capable of delivering nuclear weapons. Notwithstanding that change in language, the world's concerns remain. When we collectively call upon Iran to cease its ballistic missile activity, we must agree to stop it now. But Iran is as defiant of the world's insistence as ever. Because here we are, for the 12th year in a row, meeting about Iran's ballistic missiles, addressing an incredibly problematic data set. Iran's pace of missile activity, including missile launches and tests, did not diminish since the JCPOA. In fact, Iran's missile testing and missile proliferation is growing. Today, Iran has the largest ballistic missile force in the Middle East. It has more than 10 ballistic missile systems in its inventory or in development. It has hundreds of missiles which pose a threat to our partners in the region. From more recent times. In 2016, during the time of the JCPOA, Iran unveiled 2 new short-range ballistic missiles, which it claims are capable of striking targets between 500 and 700 kilometers. In January of 2017, during the time of the JCPOA, Iran launched a medium-range missile designed to carry a payload greater than 500 kilograms and which could be used to carry nuclear warheads. Its suspected range also approaches 2,000 kilometers, which is far enough to target Athens, Sofia, Bucharest, and other major European cities. If the IRGC airspace commander is telling the truth and Iran has capabilities beyond 2,000 kilometers, other European capitals are at risk as well. In July of 2017, while the United States was still in the JCPOA, Iran tested a Samorg space launch vehicle. The United States, France, Germany, and the UK all assessed that the launch was inconsistent with 2231 because space launch vehicle uses a similar technology as intercontinental ballistic missiles. Iran has exported ballistic missile systems as well, most recently to Yemen. We have hard evidence that Iran is providing missiles, training, and support to the Houthis, and the Iranian Houthi missile force is fully engaged. This poses a threat to innocent civilians, including Americans living in Riyadh, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, as well as people of all nationalities who travel on civilian aircraft in that region. Iran is also transferring ballistic missile systems to Shia militias in Iraq. And just look at the last 2 weeks. The Iranian regime test-fired a medium-range ballistic missile that is capable of carrying multiple warheads. Our goodwill gestures have been futile in correcting the Iranian regime's reckless missile activity and its destructive behaviors. No nation can dispute that Iran is in open defiance of UN Security Council Resolution 2231. The United States is not alone in raising these concerns. I'd like to thank France and Germany and the United Kingdom for raising concerns about Iranian missile proliferation to the Secretariat. I would also like to thank our partners from Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates who are working with UN inspectors in recovering material debris of Iranian-supplied missiles, rockets, and UAVs launched into their countries by Houthi forces in Yemen. Our Israeli allies have brought further evidence to the Security Council about Iran's continued launches of ballistic missiles that are inherently capable of carrying nuclear weapons. Israel has also given evidence to the Secretariat of Iran's transfer of weapon systems to its proxies all around the Middle East, and in defiance of what we have insisted that they do. So the question is now, what steps ought we take to confront this Iranian malign activity? We risk the security of our people if Iran continues stocking up on ballistic missiles. We risk escalation of conflict in the region if we fail to restore deterrence. And we convey to all other malign actors that they too can defy the Security Council with impunity if we do nothing. The United Nations Charter, as you all know well, calls the primary bestows upon the Security Council the primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security. We all take this responsibility seriously. The United States seeks to work with all other members of the Council to reimpose on Iran the ballistic missile restrictions outlined in 1929. Beyond addressing Iran's ballistic missile activities, the Council should not lift the arms embargo in 2020 on Iran. This is a country in noncompliance with multiple UN Security Council resolutions, including those related to Al-Qaeda, Afghanistan, Lebanon, Yemen, and Somalia. Iran is harboring Al-Qaeda, supporting Taliban militants in Afghanistan, arming terrorists in Lebanon, facilitating illicit trade in Somali charcoal benefiting al-Shabaab, and training and equipping Shia militias in Iraq, even as we sit here today. It is also stoking conflict in Syria and Yemen. The Council must address these malign activities. It cannot reward Iran by lifting the arms embargo. We also call on the Council to establish inspection and interdiction measures in ports and on the high seas to thwart Iran's continuing efforts to circumvent the existing arms restrictions. Some have questioned our decision to withdraw from the JCPOA. We reply that it is self-evident why we did so, based upon the very conversation we're having here today. Prior to the deal, Western leaders made grand claims of how the JCPOA would usher in a new era of moderation from the Iranian regime. Indeed, America's own president said, quote, ideally, we would see a situation in which Iran, seeing sanctions reduced, would start focusing on its economy, on training its people, on re-entering the world community, to lessening its provocative activities in the region. But what do we actually see? The JCPOA has, without a doubt, to date, shielded the Islamic Republic of Iran from the accountability to the risks it presents to the world. The Iranian regime is pursuing the same destructive, revolutionary goals that it has for the past 39 years, except now it has more money to achieve them, thanks to the nuclear deal. I'm here today first and foremost as my capacity as the Secretary of State of the United States of America. Under President Trump, the security of our people and our allies comes first. But in the finest traditions of American leadership, the United States will continue to unite sovereign nations in their responsibility to work for the peace and security of their own people and a stable international order. The United States is going to continue to be relentless in building a coalition of responsible nations who are serious in confronting the Iranian regime's reckless ballistic missile activity. This includes the treatment of its own people as well. That type of malign activity is something that the United States will keep standing side by side with the people of Iran. They have been the worst victims of the regime for nearly 40 years, and they have the unwavering support of the United States. Finally, the Trump administration clearly defined in May the 12 areas in which we are demanding change from Iran. If Iran makes a fundamental strategic shift and honors these demands, we are prepared to ease our pressure campaign and support the modernization and reintegration of the Iranian economy into the international economic system. But relief from our efforts will come only when we see tangible, demonstrated, and sustained shifts in Tehran's policies. Thank you.
Je remercie.
I thank His Excellency, Mr. Pompeo, for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of France.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. President, Secretary of State, please allow me to first of all thank the Côte d'Ivoire presidency for holding this important meeting, and I would like to greet most especially the presence with us of the Secretary of State of the United States, Mr. Mike Pompeo. I would like to also thank Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo, Undersecretary General, and the representative of the European Union. I thank them for their briefings. And finally, I would like to very warmly thank our Dutch colleague and his team for the work they've been doing in their capacity as a facilitator for the implementation of Resolution 2231. Mr. President, this past year has showed to what extent the non-proliferation regime for weapons of mass destruction and their delivery weapons cannot be considered as an already key, and its consolidation is something that requires our constant mobilization on the part of us all. The meeting today on Resolution 2231 is therefore particularly timely because we are talking about the most significant recent non-proliferation accomplishment. This was a resolution which was put forward by all of the permanent members of the Security Council, was adopted unanimously, and it was a product of the perseverance of the international community and the role played by the Council, and this sealed a major compromise arrived at Vienna after years of negotiations. In other words, this is a resolution which is the embodiment of the unity of the international community, this Security Council, and all of its members, in particular its permanent members. The trajectory of the participant states to JCPOA, nonetheless, has diverged since 2015. And as is mentioned by the Secretary General in his report, we also expressed our concerns and our regrets having to do with the implications of with the U.S. withdrawal and the reimposition of the U.S. sanctions. But we do share all the same objective, namely making sure that Iran does not obtain nuclear weapons and to guarantee through very strict international control the peaceful use of its program. And this is what enabled us to put together the JCPOA for 10 years. And today, there is no credible alternative to it today. The collapse of the agreement would mean a serious step back, and we will all pay the price for it. Mr. President, this year a serious crisis of confidence has opened this year, but the agreement remains in place and it functions. Iran continues honoring its nuclear obligations. This was confirmed for the 13th time in a row by the International Atomic Energy Agency, and we have to welcome that. This situation has to be shored up by the honoring of all of our commitments for all of the members of the UN, above and beyond parties to the plan. No external development should have an impact on the implementation of the commitments, and France, therefore, will continue actively supporting the agreement for as long as Iran will continue to rigorously and fully honor its nuclear obligations, as well as its effort in order to preserve the economic benefits which stem from JCPOA. Mr. President, we welcome the rigorous work carried out by this Secretariat that we see in this balanced report, which was developed fully in line with the mandate. Our collective commitments do not end with the JCPOA. It's all of the resolutions in provisions of Resolution 2231 that Iran has to respect. But the report identifies certain elements of Iranian activity which are not in line with the provisions of the resolution, and this gives rise to a very serious concern on our part. On the ballistic issue in particular, France, together with Germany and the UK, expressed its concern on several occasions. I'd like to recall that the missiles in question are technically designed in such a way that they are capable of carrying nuclear weapons. And this is the kind of activity which is not in line with the Resolution 2231, and we collectively call Iran not to undertake this activity. The issue of ballistic transfers towards state and non-state actors, in particular Secretariat conclusions on the ballistic missiles fired by the Houthi, is also a source of serious concern for France. Whether we're talking about Yemen or the Syrian theater, this is also contrary to Resolution 1540 of the Security Council. This is also, which is also an essential element of the international non-proliferation architecture. So let us be clear here, Mr. President. It is essential for regional stability and international peace and security for Iran to immediately cease all of these destabilizing activities. We have already expressed our concern about this, including doing this directly with the Iranian authorities. It's now up to every one of us to very clearly convey this message, and France will continue its demanding dialogue with Iran on this issue. Mr. President, to conclude, I would like to echo the appeal launched by the Secretary General to all of the states, whether they are participants in or not, to ensure the continuity of JCPOA as a pillar of international and regional peace and security. Please be sure that France, who worked tirelessly to make sure that this is a robust mechanism and it has demand verification mechanism, will remain fully committed here. It is only on this basis that we will be able to build together a long-term strategy in the region. And this strategy cannot be reduced to a policy of exerting pressures and sanctions. It also has to include a firm and frank dialogue with the Iranians on those things which give rise to our concerns. And it is this way that the international community will be able to lay the foundations for a new agreement which will include the framing of the Iranian nuclear issue beyond 2025-2030, frame the Iranian ballistic activity and regional stability. There is no other way to make sure there is lasting stability in the region or to attain the goal of Iran never obtaining nuclear weapons. I thank you.
I thank the representative of France for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. President. Thank you for scheduling this debate. And we're very grateful to Secretary Pompeo for taking the time to be here today. This debate comes at a very important moment. The world is an unpredictable place right now, and the developments we're going to discuss today risk making it more so. I'd also like to join others in thanking the Under-Secretary General and in thanking the Dutch representative and his team for all the work they have done on 2231. Today's agenda, Mr. President, is the implementation of that resolution. That resolution was an endorsement of the JCPOA, but throughout the negotiations and at the adoption of the resolution, we were clear that the Council was not only addressing nuclear issues, but continuing to impose binding restriction to curb Iran's ballistic missile and proliferation activity because it threatens the region and beyond. And I just want to stress, Mr. President, the point about the ballistic missile proliferation is not solely about nuclear missiles, notwithstanding that there is a link with nuclear capability. Any conventional payload would cause extensive harm to civilians and infrastructure, and member states in the region, Mr. President, will naturally be deeply concerned about being confronted by such a threat from Iran. In itself, it heightens instability in the region, and it heightens the risk of miscalculation. And as Secretary Pompeo said, the international community has been trying to curb this activity since at least 2006. Mr. President, if I may, I'd like to set out the policy of my government towards Iran. We are motivated by three objectives. Firstly, and most critically, to uphold the global non-proliferation regime and prevent Iran achieving a nuclear capability that would threaten the Middle East region and Europe beyond it. Secondly, to constrain Iran's destabilizing actions in the region. And thirdly, to encourage Iran to normalize its economic and diplomatic relations with the region and the West and assume its rightful role as a responsible power, constructively engaged. The United Kingdom participated in negotiations on a nuclear deal with Iran to secure the first of those objectives, and we believe the JCPOA has done so. It remains critical for our national security, and we believe for the shared security of our partners and allies. And I agree with what the French ambassador said on the way forward. We were also clear that the nuclear deal contained elements designed to encourage Iran on a path to normalcy in its trade and diplomatic relations with the outside world. The Secretary-General's report records Iran continues to comply with its nuclear-related obligations, and the IAEA confirmed this in their report of 12 November. We expect this commitment to continue, and we look to Iran to continue to abide by its obligations under the deal in full. So our first objective, Mr. President, continues to be met, and for this reason, the United Kingdom, together with France and Germany, have been working to ensure that Iran continues to receive the economic benefits from sanctions relief agreed as part of the nuclear deal. To this end, in September, we announced the creation of a European special purpose vehicle to help facilitate this. This work continues, and we hope to announce further progress soon. There remains, however, much work to do towards the second objective, the ending of Iran's destabilizing regional behaviour. And no one should be in any doubt, Mr. President, about the strength of our concern and the strength of our commitment to tackle that, and the fact that compliance with the JCPOA, important as it is, for all the reasons the French ambassador set out, it is not a licence to engage in destabilising behaviour elsewhere, whether or not that has a nuclear link. Iran cannot, Mr. President, expect to improve its relations with the rest of the world or ensure its economic prosperity and security while pursuing its current path. Business will not invest, and public finances should be spent at home and not diverted to adventurism abroad. The briefing given by the Under-Secretary-General today has been very clear, and the findings in the Secretary-General's report should continue to trouble this Council. As the report notes, the United Kingdom, along with our E3 partners, raised our concerns over recent Iranian ballistic missile launches into Syria in a letter on 20 November. Since then, as the Security Council discussed on 4 December, Iran has test-fired a medium-range ballistic missile with a capability falling under MTCR Category 1. This latest launch, like those referenced in the E3 letter, is inconsistent with Security Council Resolution 2231. Now, Mr. President, we heard a number of arguments when we met before to discuss this issue in consultations. I'm sure we'll hear many of those arguments again today, so I'd like to address them briefly, if I may. Some colleagues have made the point that the language in Resolution 2231, OP7 and Annex B, Paragraph 3, are not binding. The second plank of that argument is that the Council should therefore not concern itself with Iran's behaviour because we argue it's inconsistent with it. Mr. President, we believe that's an extraordinary, but it's also a flawed argument for two reasons. Leaving aside the question of whether the language is legally binding or not, this Council has the power to make recommendations to Member States with a view to resolving any matter that threatens the maintenance of international peace and security. It is clear that these recommendations should be taken seriously by Member States rather than openly flouted. The call upon Iran to comply with the request not to undertake any activity related to ballistic missiles designed to be capable of delivering nuclear weapons has a clear purpose, and that purpose, Mr. President, is to reduce international and regional tension. In defying the Council's clearly expressed view, Iran is, to say the least, not contributing to the stability of the region. Rather, she is ignoring the express wishes of this Council. Tendentious arguments which seek to diminish the Council's voice on this serve only to undermine the Council's prerogative and authority and to encourage other states to disregard the resolutions of the Security Council. We should all, Mr. President, be deeply concerned by such irresponsible behaviour. Another fallacious argument, which I'm sure we'll hear today, is that the MTCR is irrelevant, that it is only an arms export regime. Mr. President, the MTCR is itself an important part of international efforts against proliferation. MTCR Category 1, which describes a platform capable of delivering first-generation nuclear weapon, commonly defined as around 500 kilograms minimum, to a distance of 300 kilometres. So it matters that Iran test-fired a ballistic missile with a capability that falls under MTCR Category 1. These missiles are not harmless tools of self-defence. They are a source of concern, and they're included in this resolution because if Iran were to develop a nuclear weapon, these missiles would be its delivery vehicle. They therefore not only threaten the region, but Europe and potentially others beyond. Testing them is provocative, and the Council should respond. Therefore, Mr. President, let me say that we demand Iran cease activity that defies Resolution 2231. We demand that Iran and all Member States fully comply with the resolutions prohibiting the proliferation of missile technology to and from Iran, on which, by the way, there is no doubt that these are indeed legally binding. On our second objective, we note with deep regret but also concern that throughout the region, Iran continues to play a negative role supporting non-state actors that undermine the stability of its neighbours. In Syria, Iran has been the key supporter of Bashar al-Assad's murderous 7-year campaign. Militias funded and controlled by Iran have been integral to Assad's military campaign to retake opposition-held territory, committing gross abuses of human rights in the process. Iran has proactively shipped weapons systems into Syria, inflaming tensions with its neighbours, as well as violating the provisions of Resolution 2231. For example, Mr. President, in just the past week, Israel has had to take action to prevent Iranian-backed Hezbollah militants tunnelling under its borders. These Hezbollah activities are a clear violation of Security Council Resolution 1701, and they are further evidence of Iran's destabilising activity. The United Kingdom condemns the existence of these tunnels. They threaten the security of Israel and Lebanon. The violation of Israeli sovereignty is deeply concerning, and moreover, Mr. President, it takes Iran's destabilising activity literally to new depths. In Yemen, we are watching the ongoing talks in Stockholm carefully, and we welcome the attendance of the Houthi delegation. And I accept, Mr. President, it's important to note that Iran has expressed its strong support for the talks in Sweden. But the situation in Yemen remains of serious concern, and the Secretary-General reports today includes information about ballistic missiles fired at Saudi Arabia by the Houthis, as well as anti-tank and surface-to-air missiles recovered in Yemen. These weapons had characteristics and components consistent with those known to be manufactured in Iran. Mr. President, I have had, in the course of my recent work, I have been to Tehran to discuss many of these issues with the Iranian leadership. And each time I've been clear that this habit of testing weapons that threaten her neighbours, defy the Council by exporting weapons and militias around the regions, makes it very difficult to see how Iran can play a constructive role in her region. And it means that she has no legitimacy when complaining when this Council puts such behaviour on its agenda. Mr. President, I have long said that Iran has legitimate security interests in the region. We recognise that. But the way Iran goes about pursuing those interests is leading to increasing destabilisation and is simply not legitimate in the modern world. A different approach is available to Iran that concentrates on reintegration into the economic community of the world and into the world diplomatic engagement. We support Iran in seeking to benefit from economic development, and we want her to fulfil her undoubted potential as a vibrant economy and an important power. But these are not unconditional goals, Mr. President. Iran can never achieve these objectives without a vital change in approach on the issues I've mentioned here today. Iran needs to take steps to address the concerns of this Council seriously and to recognise that its expeditionary and expansionist security doctrine will only provoke more challenge and lead to greater instability within the region. This is why, Mr. President, the United Kingdom, together with our European partners, we continue to participate in the JCPOA. We will continue to work with everyone to convince Iran to take a radically different approach to the region and help secure for herself a more prosperous future. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for her statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation. Thank you, Mr. President. We'd like to thank the Undersecretary General Rosemary DiCarlo, thank her for presenting the semi-annual report on implementing Resolution 2231, a resolution which endorsed the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action on the Iran nuclear program. We also note the effective work carried out by the permanent representative of the Netherlands, Mr. Karl van Oostrom, as in his role Security Council facilitator for the implementation of the resolution. We fully share what is stated by the Secretary General when he states that the decision by the United States to withdraw from JCPOA and restore unilateral sanctions are a serious challenge and are not conducive towards attaining the goals in JCPOA and in the Resolution 2231. We also join in with the global appeal launched by the Secretary General to ensure that we preserve this unique agreement, which is of fundamental importance for international and regional security. We fully share the conclusion in the report, which states that the issues which are not within the scope of the agreement should not be used as a reason for its dismantlement. The Russian Federation has warned on many occasions against the attempt to torpedo the JCPOA and expressed their hope that reason will prevail and that the issues of global security and stability will not be held hostage to domestic political processes. Unfortunately, our appeals were not heeded, and we are now facing a paradoxical situation where one member of the Council not only openly refusing to implement Resolution 2231, which it itself approved, but is also trying to punish all other member states for implementing the decisions of the Council and the Joint JCPOA Commission. At present, the only way to preserve the agreement is the diligent implementation by all remaining member states of the commitments they voluntarily undertook. And this context, we note that the Secretary General's report is a clear evidence of Iran's unconditional implementation of their commitments on the JCPOA, and this is consistently being confirmed by the IAEA, but also by the UN Secretariat, which, according to the document, has no proof to the contrary. Mr. President, once again, we are compelled to recall that it's unacceptable for the Secretariat to conduct any kind of so-called investigations of potential implementation, 2231 implementation violations without a clear mandate from the Security Council. We're not going to talk about the technical expertise of the Secretariat when they, on components and debris, decide to talk about the technical characteristics of various missiles and hint at their Iranian origin. But we have legitimate questions of the mandate of such specialists about the status of their trips and the authority they have to reach far-reaching conclusions. The desire to use the UN authority in order to help with unsubstantiated allegations of Iran's violations of 2231 is something that we cannot understand. But the representatives of the Secretariat themselves state in their report that they only worked with what they were provided with by third countries. The inspection and monitoring activity by the Secretariat, when it's not agreed, regardless of its reason, is something that needs to be stopped once and for all. Still, we insist that the report is not to contain information from open sources, nor reference to information provided individual countries, information unverified or unverifiable information, all the less so when it's not even being given to members of the Security Council. Once again, we'd like to draw the attention of the Secretariat that Item 7 of the Security Council President's Note of 16 January 2016 provides for the semi-annual reports on implementing Resolution 2231 as a whole, not its individual parts. We have heard today a lot about ballistic missiles. Let me recall that there is an Item 3 of Annex B of Resolution 2231. The Iran there is called upon not to undertake activities having to do with ballistic missiles which are designed to be capable of delivering nuclear weapons. Overall, missile launches in general are not banned, and any proof showing that they may have a nuclear component are absent. Mr. President, the United States' withdrawal from JCPOA did serious damage to the non-proliferation regime and also the interests of security in the Middle East. It's time to abandon unilateral actions. History shows that they are doomed to failure. But on the other hand, genuine efforts of states to counter regional efforts is something that can provide us with long-term results and help overcome crises and stabilize situations. We think that JCPOA is exactly that kind of a product. It became a key point in our joint work in the region to create conditions conducive to strengthen the general atmosphere of trust. Thanks to it, we had hope of moving towards the implementation of a major goal, namely creating a WMD-free zone in the Middle East. Russia advocates preserving the JCPOA. We will launch an appeal not to artificially create situations when some UN member states call other governments of other member states a pariah. Not only is this not helpful in resolving many problems in the issues, it creates new ones. It's obvious that in order to lower the crisis, what we need to do is to pool international and regional efforts, including through effective, inclusive formats with a central role played by the UN and the Security Council. Many of our colleagues in the Council regularly are trying to use the format of our meeting today in order to discuss the so-called regional behavior of Iran, which they depict as though it were the only source of all the woes in the Middle East. At the same time, and given that Iran is ready for a dialogue, what they do not voice is any kind of a substantive proposal on this topic. And sometimes we're left with the impression that the only goal is to further escalate anti-Iran hysteria and to demonize Iran. And in actual fact, what it does is exacerbates the already difficult situation in the Middle East. The Russian Federation advocates for developing a positive and inclusive agenda for the Security Council and the whole international community for the Middle East, and take into account the legitimate interests of all countries in the region, including Iran. The key moment of our work in the region should be creating such conditions which could lead to improving the general atmosphere of trust. And this is of importance for relations between Arab states, Israel, and Iran. Let me recall that already in its Resolution 598 of 1988, the Security Council requested the Secretary General to work out together with regional actors on the ways of increasing security and stability in the region. And this is not an easy issue, but work needs to begin in this area, and we stand ready to what we can through contacts with our regional partners. The ultimate goal should be creating such an architecture of regional security which would be truly inclusive in nature and provide for including all of the states in that part of the world. What remains topical is our concept of strengthening security in the Persian Gulf under international guarantees, and this could start by holding a conference with the participation of countries of the region. This could then be broadened to other Middle Eastern countries. On all of these and other aspects, Russia is ready to work together with partners who are interested on the basis of that's open and impartial without any threats or negative pressure. Mr. President, in conclusion, I would like to once again point out that the Russian Federation remains committed to the unconditional and comprehensive implementation of the provisions of 2231 and JCPOA. Its implementation, despite the U.S. withdrawal, is being continued by all its other participants. I thank you. I thank the representative of the Russian Federation, and I now give the floor to the representative of Kuwait.
شكرا السيد الرئيس. في البداية أود أن أضم صوتي لمن سبقوني في الترحيب.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, I would like to express my thanks to the Secretary of State, Mr. Pompeo. I would like also to express my thanks to Mrs. Mary DiCarlo, the Under-Secretary General for Political Affairs, on her comprehensive briefing concerning the sixth-month report of the Secretary General on the implementation of Resolution 2231. I would also like to thank the facilitator for the implementation of Resolution 2231, as well as the representative of the European Union on behalf of the Joint Commission on their briefings to the Council. 3 years ago, Kuwait welcomed the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action and the subsequent adoption by the Security Council of Resolution 2231. Indeed, the agreement does not address all the concerns of the countries in the region, where security conditions continue to deteriorate and whose domestic affairs continue to be interfered with. However, we took note of the sixth report of the Secretary General developed under the provisions of Annex B to Resolution 2231, which gives an overview of the nuclear, ballistic missile and weapons regulations and the measures aiming to strengthen the implementation of the resolution. Mr. President, the provisions of Resolution 2231 are not limited to the nuclear aspect only, but transcend that to control activities related to ballistic missiles technologies and the transfer of traditional weapons. In this regard, we are concerned about the continued launching of ballistic missiles at the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia as per the report. The report also mentions transfers of military weapons and equipment and material to other countries in the region. The Secretariat couldn't verify the date of transfer of the mentioned weapons and continues to investigate the same. However, this issue remains one of heightened seriousness and threatens international peace and security. In this context, Kuwait condemns the launch of ballistic missiles at the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which is recurrent, thus threatening its national security and jeopardizes the lives of civilians. We also stress our firm position, which calls for the preservation of security and stability in the region and the safety of its peoples. It is important also not to interfere in the domestic affairs of countries and to respect the sovereignty thereof in accordance with the provisions of the Charter of the United Nations, international law, the principles of neighborliness, and to settle disputes by peaceful means and to refrain from the use of force or the threat thereof. In conclusion, Kuwait reaffirms that the Security Council should continue to shoulder its responsibility and follow up the implementation of Resolution 2231 in a comprehensive manner that guarantees the compliance by Iran and other states with their commitments, not only in the sphere of nuclear non-proliferation, but also the other aspects contained in the resolution. And before concluding, I would take this opportunity to express my appreciation to Ambassador Karl van Ostrom in his capacity as facilitator for the implementation of Resolution 2231 and the members of his mission for the efforts they made during the past year. And we wish them and the country continued success in all their endeavors. Thank you, Mr. President.
Merci.
I thank the representative of Kuwait. I now give the floor to the representative of China.
Mr. President, first of all, I thank USG De Carlo and Ambassador Van Oosterom for their briefings. I welcome the presence and coming to the meeting of Secretary General Pompeo. The JCPOA, as a multilateral agreement endorsed by the Security Council resolution, has the effect of international law, and as an important achievement of multilateralism, it is in the common interest of the international community. It is playing a significant role in upholding the international nuclear non-proliferation regime and maintaining peace and stability in the Middle East. It also serves as a model for addressing international and regional hostile issues by diplomatic means. Despite the abrupt changes in the situation in the past 6 months, the current participants to the JCPOA, with a sense of responsibility, continue to focus on implementing the agreement while maintaining normal economic and trade cooperation with Iran, and have received broad support from the international community. The IEA has confirmed Iran's compliance with its nuclear-related commitments under the JCPOA for 13 times consecutively. And the coordination between the Council and the procurement channel functions normally. Practice has proved that the JCPOA is an effective agreement and needs to be fully and effectively implemented. Mr. President, currently, the implementation of the JCPOA is at a critical juncture. China appreciates Iran's efforts to implement resolution and the JCPOA and hopes that Iran can continue its implementation and the other participants will continue to fulfill their commitments. China regrets the withdrawal of the United States from the JCPOA and its subsequent decision to reimpose sanctions, and calls on all parties to work on a proper solution to the difficulties faced in maintaining normal economic and trade cooperation with Iran. We believe that all parties concerned need to proceed from the overall long-term interests, adhere to multilateralism, uphold multilateral agreements, fulfill their due responsibilities and obligations, and facilitate a steady and sustained implementation of Resolution 2231 and the JCPOA. Mr. President, the Secretary General's report emphasizes the need for all the parties to adhere to multilateralism, cooperate in responding to challenges, and work together to preserve the JCPOA. It supports the initiatives of the JCPOA participants to protect the freedom to conduct lawful trade with Iran in accordance with Resolution 2231 and calls on all parties to support the procurement channel. China expressed its appreciation for these elements. At the same time, China also believes that the SG's report should be balanced and objective. It should comprehensively reflect the implementation of the resolution and fully address Iran's legitimate concerns. The Secretariat needs to strictly act on its mandate and functions to avoid including unverified elements into the report. Under the current circumstances, the parties should exercise caution in dealing with the missile launches of Iran and accurately interpret the resolution of the Security Council. Iran has several times stated that it has no intention to develop nuclear weapons, and its missiles are not designed to be capable of delivering nuclear weapons. And China commends Ambassador Van Oosterom and his team for the efforts they have made as facilitator of the 2231 format. China has taken note of the recent report submitted to the Council by the Joint Commission on the work of the Procurement Working Group and will continue to participate in the work thereof. Mr. President, China has always advocated a political and diplomatic solution to the Iranian nuclear issue, remains committed to consolidating the international nuclear non-proliferation regime, and maintain international and regional peace and stability. China will continue to uphold impartiality and objectivity with a strong sense of responsibility and work together with the international community in a tireless effort to uphold the JCPOA. I thank you, Mr. President.
Merci.
I thank the representative of China. I now give the floor to the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Thank you, Mr. President. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, ambassadors, I would like to begin by sincerely thanking those council members who reaffirmed their commitment to continue supporting the JCPOA. At the time when multilateralism is under threat, preserving the JCPOA, which according to the United Nations Secretary General, is a demonstration of successful multilateralism and a major achievement in dialogue and diplomacy, is of utmost importance. From this perspective, we laud the call by distinguished Secretary General in his report that the JCPOA participants, the Council, all member states and regional and other international actors must ensure the continuity of this agreement that is fundamental to regional and international peace and security. In this meeting that is held to consider the implementation of Resolution 2231, the Council should therefore consider and address all obstacles created in its implementation, in particular its provisions on promoting and facilitating the development of normal economic and trade contact and cooperation with Iran. As it is well known, the sustainability of the JCPOA has been seriously challenged by unilateral and unlawful conduct of the United States in withdrawing from the JCPOA and reimposing illegal sanctions against Iran. It is a clear violation of the resolution that calls upon all states without exception, which includes the United States, not only to take action as may be appropriate to support the implementation of the JCPOA, but also to refrain from action that undermine implementation of commitments under the JCPOA. Therefore, the Council should consider the United States' illegal act as a flagrant violation of the resolution and hold it accountable for such violations. It is evident that any inaction or leniency in taking appropriate action to prevent the violation of resolution will only embolden the United States to continue its unlawful practices and irresponsible policies. The irony is that the United States, who itself is in absolute violation of the Resolution 2231, today accused Iran of violating this resolution. What we heard today was another series of lies, fabrication, disinformation, and deceptive statements by the United States. It is not unprecedented. Just recall infamous speeches made in the past at this very chamber by the United States officials. It is not surprising, too. Deception is an inseparable part of the United States foreign policy, as is bullying and its addiction to sanction and warmongering. A clear example of such policies in the American approach toward Iran's peaceful nuclear program, on which it manufactured an unnecessary crisis and were successful in abusing this council to impose illegal sanctions. Nevertheless, as soon as it was ended with the conclusion of the JCPOA and the IAEA repeatedly confirmed Iran's full compliance with its commitment, the United States withdrew from the JCPOA, violated Resolution 2231, reimposed its illegal sanction, and started punishing states who abide by the resolution. Such policies and practices clearly indicate that even in the past, they did not have any genuine concern about Iran's nuclear program. Now, for the first time in the United Nations history, a permanent member of this Security Council is blatantly punishing United Nations member states not for violating, rather for complying with the Security Council resolution. That is the first time in the history of the Security Council. And yet, the US finds the audacity to hijack the Council to intensify its hostilities against Iran. We have not forgotten the days when the United States has rendered this Council ineffective in preventing Saddam's aggression, stopping the use of chemical weapons against Iranians, as well as addressing the attacks to the Iranian civil aircraft over the Persian Gulf by the American forces, killing all 290 people on board, including 66 children. Rather than allowing the U.S. to repeat such abusive patterns, the Council should strongly condemn the U.S. for reimposing its illegal sanction against Iranians in violation of the United Nations Charter and international law. This sanction only harms the ordinary and, more importantly, vulnerable people of Iran, such as women, children, elderly, and patients. They prevent even the import of basic food, medicine, and medical devices to Iran. Unlike the U.S. declaration, in practice, there is no exception or exemption for importing such needs. Now, they argue that banks don't have confidence in Iran's banking system to facilitate those transactions. That's Iran's problem. It is not our problem. Isn't it ironic and disgraceful? How come they had confidence to Iran's banking system till weeks ago and suddenly and for no reason lost their confidence? In fact, they avoid such transactions because they are intimidated and threatened by a bullying and irresponsible state. On 7th November 2018, the United States Secretary of State threatened all Iranians to mass starvation. He said the Iranian, quote, leadership has to make a decision that they want their people to eat. That is the statement of the Secretary of State of the United States. Does weaponizing of food and medicine against civilians have any other designation than crime against humanity? Isn't the disruption of free trade and application of the United States national laws to other nations, thus disrespecting their sovereignty, a clear manifestation of economic terrorism? The international community should stand against American bullying policies, and the U.S. authorities should be held to account for ordering, committing, and enforcing such horrible crimes. Mr. President, through fabrication, disinformation, and invoking irrelevant criteria, the United States tries to create ambiguity and confusion in order to misinterpret the resolution with regard to Iran's missile launches. Here, I draw your attention to the interpretation of relevant paragraphs of the resolution by the U.S. Special Envoy on Iran, not by Iran, by the U.S. Special Envoy on Iran, who says that the resolution simply and kindly called upon Iran not to undertake certain activities. He then concludes that the resolution's language is hardly a clear and enforceable prohibition. Iran's ballistic missile program is designed to be exclusively capable of delivering conventional warheads required to deter foreign threats. While the Americans argue that Iran's security concerns are entirely self-generated, and also hypocritically state that Iran faces no natural threat from Israel. As recently as 3 months ago, its prime minister threatens Iran with even nuclear annihilation. That was the threat by Prime Minister of Israel. Definitely a wishful dream. Moreover, no one can ignore consistent, tremendous threats Iran continues to face from the United States itself, in particular through its outdated mantra of all options are on the table, which means military threat. They are dreaming wishfully to move us back to those days when Saddam's planes bombed an Iranian city for 105 minutes, the longest aerial assault since World War II, killing and injuring over 1,000 civilians. They also wish to move us back to those days when Saddam was raining missiles on our cities, some of them carrying chemical components provided by the United States, and Iran was actively prevented from purchasing even the most rudimentary means of self-defense to at least deter the aggressor. Do not be surprised. They even prevented the export of barbed wire to Iran. Most of such restrictions still continue. They have paid a very high price to save our territory from the aggressors and to ensure the security of our borders and citizens. Those days have long passed. Living in such a volatile region as the Middle East, our government will not and cannot compromise on its security and its conventional defensive capability as no other country does. Describing Iran as a source of regional threat is nothing but a blame shift in order to sell more American beautiful weapons, as the United States President calls them. Conflict, insecurity, and instability in our region has two main sources. Occupation of Palestine by Israel and the American intervention and its massive military buildup in our region. Who can also forget the U.S. role, as openly confessed by its president during his campaign, in creating the ugliest face of terrorism, the monstrous ISIS. If it was not for Iran's support and help, the black flag of ISIS was still flying around the Middle East. Our neighboring countries repeatedly acknowledged and praised Iran's role in fighting and defeating Daesh in that country. In reaction to Iran's prominent role in fighting terrorist groups in Syria and Iraq, such groups have conducted a few terrorist attacks in Iran in 2017 and 2018, including in our parliament. Today, in addition to transferring ISIS elements to Afghanistan and Central Asian countries, the U.S. has extended its sponsorship of terrorism to a vicious terrorist cult, the MKO, Mujahideen Khalq, that has murdered more than 17,000 Iranians, including children, women, girls, officials, ordinary people, and many Iraqis also, and who currently cozy up to the highest political figures in Washington to destabilize Iran through terrorist activities. Here, Mr. President, I would like to stress that according to the Charter, this Council represents all member states. Thus, its decision should also echo their views. Almost all members of this organization have strongly supported the JCPOA and loudly voiced their rejection of the illegal unilateral sanction that is a clear violation of the Resolution 2231. Consequently, the Council should hold the U.S. accountable for reimposing such sanctions and demand that the U.S. end their application. This also would be in line with the obligation imposed on the U.S. by the ICJ's order issued unanimously on 3rd October 2018, an order which is a clear testament to the illegality of the U.S. sanctions. I would also like to clarify that our legal and technical observation on the report of the Secretary General is contained in a letter that yesterday I have sent to Your Excellency. It also covered our views on issues that I did not address in my remarks today. Last but not the least, the United States made baseless allegations against Iran, most of which are either not relevant to the agenda of this meeting or even does not fall under the Council purview. Therefore, in my statement, I confined my statement to this meeting's agenda and did not want to defy it as the U.S. did. At the same time, my country has responded to those allegations either through our foreign ministry or our representative in relevant international fora in Geneva, Vienna, The Hague, or here in New York. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Just a few words, because I understood your questions before the Security Council meeting that we just had. As you know, this is a meeting that we requested together with the United Kingdom on the launch of a ballistic missile by Iran on December the 1st. I think this was an important and needed meeting. I think it was useful. I think it's not up to me to say, but there is a widely shared concern about the situation there. As far as we are concerned, as France, as you know, we have condemned the launch. We indeed reiterate that the Iranian ballistic missile program and the launch of this medium-range ballistic missile is inconsistent with Security Council 2231. I insist on inconsistent with, just to answer some of the questions that you raised earlier. That's why we as France calls on Iran to immediately cease any activity related to ballistic missiles designed to be able to carry nuclear weapons, including launches using ballistic missile technology. So that's what I wanted to say. And again, ask my colleagues, but I think it was not only an interesting but a useful meeting, and you could feel the widely shared concern at the table.
2 points. The President of the Council said that the launch of the missile is not verified. Is that your view, or is that the view of the majority of the Council? And secondly...
That the launch is not verified?
No. Yeah, yes, he said it's not verified. Secondly, to use the word inconsistent, isn't that itself play on words? Can you tell us straightforward, is it violation of 2231 or it's not a violation of 2231?
I think I will only answer French questions because they are too difficult. No, to be on a more serious note, I was quite clear in what I said 1 minute ago. when I said that in...
We all know what violation is.
Sure, but you notice that what I said is also clear when I said that in our views, this program and this launch is inconsistent with Security Council resolution.
Some people will say they don't understand what you mean by it. Is it a violation or not a violation?
You want a Frenchman to explain an English word to an American audience or to an international audience.
Are you coming to the Council on Foreign Relations?
Before you tell us it's inconsistent,
Well, I'm just going to start by saying that, we called for this session with our French colleagues. We heard a lot of concern expressed round the table about what Iran had done in test launching the missiles on the 1st of December. And a number of speakers referred to the very important point that what the resolution 2231 calls on Iran not to do is develop such missiles that are designed to be capable of carrying nuclear weapons. It's not saying, just a minute please, it's not saying that nuclear missiles must be on the missiles for them not to happen. It's saying they simply need to be capable of carrying nuclear weapons, and that's a very important point. And we know from the whole issues around DPRK that these sorts of questions, capabilities, need addressing right at the start of any process if we're ever to have success in maintaining international peace and security. So you had a question?
Yes, I was just going to say, you said such matters in terms of whether it's a violation had to be addressed at the very beginning of the process. If that's the case, why was the wording so vague at the time as to say calls on Iran not to undertake such activity rather than forbidding it, which was criticised at the time?
I didn't negotiate that resolution, so I'm afraid I can't help you with parsing it. Yes, but I haven't got the textbooks and records here. Resolutions often do a multiple number of things, and different language is used in different circumstances, reflecting what is possible to get agreed. The primary focus of that resolution is obviously on the JCPOA. This is a different issue. But I do want to say that there is no legitimate reason why Iran should flout the resolution, and why their spokesman should pretend that the resolution doesn't call on them not to develop such missiles. I think that's the much more important point. If you wanted to demonstrate to the international community that you were a responsible member of it and you were genuinely interested in regional peace and security, these are not the sorts of missiles you would be test launching.
هل يمكن أن تشرح لنا يعني طبيعة هذا الاجتماع حول إيران وإطلاق هذه التجربة الصاروخية؟ ما هو
There is no decision from the council. We just held a consultation, a closed consultation on the issue. There is no outcome from the council. ما في أي قرار من المجلس. استمعنا إلى إحاطة من مساعد الأمين العام للشؤون السياسية حول الموضوع، وكان فيه كلمات كل دولة عبرت عن موقفها من التجربة هذه، لكن ما فيه يعني قرار متخذ من المجلس بالنسبة للموضوع.
هل هناك أي متابعة لهذا الموضوع؟
لا، لحد الآن ما في شيء. No. There is no consensus on this. No consensus.
Good afternoon, everyone. We had a productive Security Council meeting where the United States made clear that Iran's ballistic missile activity is out of control and that they are defying the UN Security Council 2231 in numerous ways. Iran has been testing on a testing spree and a proliferation spree, and this must come to an end. And we want to work with all members of the Security Council to reimpose tougher restrictions on the Iranian ballistic missiles. The restrictions that were in place under UNSC 1929 are the place that the world needs to be today. This threat is real